Imagine for a moment that you're an enterprising young American looking to make it big in the Antebellum South, that beautiful land of genteel manners, rich soils, and millions of brutally enslaved human beings who were unlucky enough to have been born with the wrong skin color. Naturally, slavery was big business in the southern states, but getting in on it was far from easy. For a start, you needed quite a lot of money. The average price of a black slave could range from $300 to $500, reaching an all-time high of $800 shortly before the Civil War. That might not sound like much, but keep in mind that white laborers at the time would be earning about $1 a day. The price for a prime field hand, a healthy young adult male, could be 3 times as much, close to $300,000 in today's money, and that's without considering any special skills. So, owning slaves was economically out of reach for the majority of white American farmers. The best they could hope for was renting one out during harvest time, but most people would really just be working their land themselves. Only a quarter of southern households owned any slaves, and as befits the Pareto principle, the small minority at the top owned most of the slaves. But let's say you had the cash, or the necessary connections with the various local banks so that they would lend you their racist credit. Ideally, you'd want to buy in bulk, anywhere from 10 slaves to 50 or more, either at an estate sale after a planter had died or at a bankruptcy auction. You'd usually find such deals in the old South states like Virginia, where the soil had been exhausted from centuries of tobacco exploitation. You'd then have to march your new slave band to the deep South, where they could grow cotton. Now, if you didn't own any land yourself, don't worry, Uncle Sam had your back. He had just kicked out the Indians from Mississippi and Alabama and was selling their land at rock-bottom prices, initially at $1 per acre, but later on as low as 12 cents. In other words, you could buy more than 1,000 acres of land for the price of a single slave. Truly, what you'd call a dirt cheap price. But even if you had missed that train, Texas would give you a second chance in 1845 after it carved out the northeast of Mexico and joined the Union. In just 15 short years, the slave population of Texas ballooned from 30,000 to almost 200,000, and all of it was thanks to cotton. So let's say that you've made it and have settled in the South, with your enslaved labor force picking cotton day in and day out. Thanks to the invention of the cotton gin by future war profiteer Eli Whitney, your slaves could clean 50 pounds of cotton from its sticky seeds in the same time it would take them to clean a single pound by hand. This was good because the insatiable hunger of the British textile industry ensured that there was no such thing as too much cotton. Every bale you made would be bought up instantly. You'd get fabulously rich very quickly, but you'd have plenty of worries on your mind. For a start, unlike the capitalists up north, you'd have to provide the food and shelter of your workforce yourself. Picking cotton was back-breaking work, so you'd need to keep your slaves fed and sheltered. You'd also need to provide at least some rudimentary clothing once per year, and if your slaves ever got sick or injured, you would have to nurse them back to health. After all, if your slaves died, that was a total loss of your investment, a tragedy that southern plantation owners would frequently bemoan in local newspapers. Up north, where labor was paid, the capitalists could fire their workers as soon as they turned unproductive, and then they'd just hire the next Irish immigrant straight off the boat. So, even if you hadn't taken out any loans to build your slave-driven operation, you were always one cholera outbreak away from bankruptcy. Yet the biggest threat in the mind of the southern planter was always that of the slave rebellion, that their assets would organize and jointly cast off their shackles violently. While such widespread rebellions never occurred, there were constant small-scale revolts and disobedience, enough to turn the South into a primitive police state with its very own slave patrols. But while this all might sound eerily relevant today, We have the tools to fight back against online surveillance and tyranny, thanks to our dear friends over at ExpressVPN. Rather than allowing your internet service provider to monitor or even sell your browsing activity to corporations and governments, ExpressVPN encrypts and reroutes your internet traffic through their secure servers, which protects your data, location, and identity from prying eyes. I've been using ExpressVPN to keep the Met Police off my trail for all the questionable online searches I make when researching my videos, but also to gain access to the plethora of movies and TV shows that aren't available in the UK. ExpressVPN lets you connect all your devices safely to the internet, even through public networks at hotels and airports, and all this for as low as 12 cents a day. They have servers in all 50 states and over 100 countries, letting you bypass censorship wherever you are. But best of all, as a special courtesy to SideQuest subscribers, you can get up to 4 extra months of ExpressVPN by clicking the link in the description or scanning this marvelous QR code. Just visit expressvpn.com/SideQuest and make the first step to reclaiming your privacy. Now, the planters of 19th century America were happy to sacrifice their privacy because slavery was phenomenally profitable. Planters were earning upwards of 15% annually, a return that beats out the stock market every decade. A big factor in this profitability was the fact that unlike machines, which rust and break down, an enslaved workforce actually appreciates over time. The children of enslaved women became new assets for the enslaver in a cruel and twisted form of compound interest. By 1860, the South had grown so rich off this vile system that the value of their enslaved human capital had surpassed $3 billion. That's more than the worth of all the railroads, factories, and banks across the North combined. On the eve of the Civil War, slavery was more profitable than ever, and the price of slaves had been rising for 15 years straight. So it should come as no surprise that the Southern planters took up arms to defend the source of their wealth when the abolitionists from the North won the 1860 presidential election. 7 states from the South declared independence before President Lincoln's inauguration, with 4 more joining soon after. Had the North not invaded to restore the Union, slavery would likely have continued churning out profits and human misery for decades to come. But unfortunately for the Southern planters, all their vast enslaved wealth proved quite unsuited to fighting a professional war. By pouring all of its capital into human chattel, the South underinvested in the assets that it needed to defeat the Union. 90% of American industry was in the North, and about 70% of American railroads. As it turns out, building an entire economy on the suffering of others is not only morally bankrupt, but also just a bad long-term defense strategy. Thankfully, we here at SideQuest don't have to rely on such horrible practices to keep the lights on, thanks to the generosity of our patrons. Consider supporting us on Patreon if you'd like us to explore more of history's untold stories. And if you have a topic in mind, make sure to share it in the comments. Don't forget to check out our friends over at ExpressVPN to put a stop to online surveillance, and to claim the limited time offer of 4 extra months. Thank you very much for watching, and stay tuned for the next emancipatingly enlightening episode of SideQuest. Why was the Scarecrow promoted at the plantation? He was outstanding in his field.